All right, so move on to the next segment. I'll be sharing my fight summary on the fight that took place in the co-main event of UFC 311 between Merab and Umar. So again, like last week, I apologize to you guys. I don't want to butcher these respective fighters' last names. They are hard to pronounce, so I'll be going by the champion Merab and the challenger Umar in this segment. So in the co-main event of UFC 311, we saw Merab successfully retain his bantamweight championship against Umar by unanimous decision in the co-main event of UFC 311. Now, honestly, I was wrong. I was wrong about this prediction heading into this fight. I was very confident that the challenger Umar would give the champion Merab a run for his money and a lot of problems in the octagon, because in combat sports, styles makes fights. And I thought heading into this fight, Umar would have the striking advantage, the cardio advantage, and the grappling advantage over the champion Merab. I just thought Merab just had the experience over Umar, but I was completely wrong, because as competitive as it was in the first two rounds, after round two ended, it was all Merab's world. And Merab took Umar into situations that he's not used to, into championship rounds, into the deep waters with an inexperienced challenger. Merab handled the challenge pretty well and took over and controlled the pace of the fight as the later rounds went on. Merab got the better of Umar in the striking department and the grappling department, wore him out with all those takedowns. Hell, Merab even broke the great George St. Pierre's record for the most takedowns in UFC history, most landed takedowns in UFC history. So Merab was on fire in this fight. He was having his way with Umar. And you could tell Umar was just getting fatigued. He was getting tired. He was getting frustrated. He didn't know what to really do out there. And yeah, he said he broke his hand, but am I really buying it? Or is this an excuse to just say that, or instead of you saying Merab was the better man on Saturday night? Because Merab just looked 10 times better than Umar in that octagon. And I agree with all three judges giving this fight in favor of Merab. Hats off to this performance. I didn't think Merab was going to win this fight. I thought Umar was a great matchup for him, but I was wrong. Merab now has a great first bantamweight championship defense to put on his resume, defeating an up-and-coming star in Umar. I think Umar still has a great future at this bantamweight division, but Merab was just too much for him to handle in the co-main event slot of UFC 311. Now, I think Merab was telling some truth here to the fight that him and Umar had at UFC 311, because Merab was telling Umar in the build-up to the fight at the press conferences that, hey, this is your first title shot, kid. You need to be humble. Enjoy this experience while you can. And Umar was just taking it to Merab, saying things like, oh, you're old. Even though Merab's only 34 years of age, he is obviously way older than Umar. But the challenger here was just not being in a humble state of mind that Merab was, and it paid off. I mean, Merab was the much dangerous fighter in this fight. I mean, I understand that, yes, it was the perfect time to see what Umar could do. He was 18-0 at the time, but maybe the inexperience, he lacked that heading into this fight against Merab, because Umar he still is a fantastic striker, grappler, tremendous cardio skills, but on the biggest fight of his career with his cousin Khabib in his corner, he just folded. And in the championship rounds where you're supposed to show up, it's 5 rounds. And in UFC, every round matters. Just because you're up 4-0 doesn't mean you fade away in the 5th round, because you could get finished. And it's happened in the past. Ask Kamaru Usman when he was fighting Leon Edwards, how Leon Edwards hit a buzzer beater knockout to knock out Kamaru Usman to win the fight, even though he was getting shut out 4-0. Things like that's just an example in MMA that no fight is over until the final bell of the 5th and final round of championship fights concluded. And the blueprint of learning from your cousin Khabib with the grappling, smothering your opponent on the ground, gaining ground control. Those little things could have added up for Umar, for some of the judges that scored it 48-47, the 2 out of 3 judges that scored it 48-47 in favor of Merab. If you touched up on those things and then you didn't quit in the championship rounds and you didn't get fatigued or tired or frustrated, you possibly could have walked out of 311 with the bantamweight championship. So I think inexperience played a factor. Maybe Umar was not ready for this moment. It's back to the drawing board for him. I think he still has a tremendous career in the UFC ahead of him, especially at this bantamweight division. He just ran into the champion and the best of this division at a wrong time. But Merab just picked him apart and executed and took away his best attributes and made it look easy at times, the way how he was toying around with him on the ground, picking him up and putting him down for takedowns. Merab is an interesting character, and I think he has the capabilities of being a star in the UFC. We'll see, but I was pretty satisfied with this performance that Merab had against Umar. Now, what's next for Umar? Or what's next for Merab? Merab is going to fight Sean O'Malley probably in the second half of 2025. That's probably the rematch that we're going to get at the bantamweight division, and it's the biggest fight to be made currently at the bantamweight division. I mean, Merab was pretty open at the UFC post-press conference that a challenge against Sean O'Malley again in a rematch would probably happen, and he's open to it. Now, if this rematch happens, I think the build-up could be fun. But if Sean O'Malley is somebody that's known for being a striker and having that boxing background, that boxing pedigree with the kickboxing style that he possesses, if he doesn't touch up on the wrestling style, if he doesn't do a better job at stuffing takedowns, or hell, even getting some type of grappling offensive game plan for his own sake, it's going to be a shutout performance once again in the hands of Merab. Because if you can't wrestle, if you can't go blow for blow wrestling with Merab, a takedown machine, a cardiovascular king. His cardio is top notch. Oh, excuse me for the ESPN, but his cardio is top notch. And I would say that if Sean O'Malley doesn't make the adjustments, Merab is just going to have his way with him. So I'm looking forward to seeing that rematch. But if Sean O'Malley doesn't give us the adjustments that he needs, be on the lookout for another one-sided affair that we saw at UFC 306. But that is my Merab and Umar fight prediction or fight summary from the fight that we saw in the co-main event of UFC 311.